Welcome everybody to the Boat Dealer Profits Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Sellhorst, creator of the Splash System and founder of the Boat Dealer Profits Marketing Agency, where we're committed to helping family-owned boat dealerships just like you sell more boats, make more money, and have more fun. I tell you, this episode today, I just wanted to share some insights that I gathered. I was the keynote speaker at a dealer meeting earlier this week and just got back from travel yesterday. And was speaking at this dealer meeting, and they did something very interesting. They were a premium level boat builder, and what they did is they brought, after my 90-minute talk, they brought 6 of their past customers up. Some of them were current boat owners and had bought several of their boats and moved up through the sizes. Others were buying their first boat. One, he had just taken his delivery of his new boat, his first boat, and he took delivery 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks prior to him talking. So it was a very interesting conversation. And in my keynote, I start, as I oftentimes do, talking about the educational spectrum of the boat buyer. If you haven't read my boating industry articles or read my book, Boat Dealer Profits, where I talk about it in there, or listen to the podcast where I walk through the educational spectrum of the boat buyer, you may want to do that because it's a very valuable concept, talking about from the consumer standpoint, what steps do they go through from, hey honey, maybe we should buy a boat, to money changing hands, and the process that happens in between there. And I give you just a brief summary. I divide it into researchers, evaluators, and now buyers. And in my keynote, I start with that, kind of lay the foundation, just to give everybody the idea of, hey, this is what happens from the consumer standpoint. And if you can understand what the consumer goes through, and you can also, as a salesperson, try to figure out, okay, this is where they're at in the process, so this is how I need to speak to them, or I need to speak to them in multiple ways until I figure out who they are. And this is especially true when you're talking with new leads that come online, which so many of our opportunities come online these days. Might be a boat builder, build-a-boat lead, or a brochure lead. Might be a boat trader lead, or an inventory lead directly from your website. Maybe a finance application lead that came in that you don't have a personal relationship with. All you have is a name, email address, maybe a phone number, maybe an address, maybe a couple of questions, but you can't determine this is what they are like you would be able to if they walked into the showroom and you asked a couple of good introductory questions to sort of figure them out and how to handle them. So I did my talk on the educational spectrum of the boat buyer, went through some other material, and had a great session. Got a lot of great comments from it. And then the clients came up. So they sat up and they did a great job with them. They just asked them some open-ended questions and really just let them speak. Now, I'll set the stage a little bit about who these people were. They were obviously successful, being boat buyers, but they ranged from ultra successful with multiple boats, and they had one of them, a 41-footer, was the tender to his yacht. And he had a boat at his home in the north. He had a boat at his home in Florida, and he had multiple of this manufacturer's boat. There was another gentleman that, like I said, was his first boat. He had just taken delivery 2 weeks ago. And again, it was a premium boat, but it was a 23 or a 25. So, nothing that was outstanding, but still very successful. And here's what I found very interesting, listening to their language. And I'm very big in listening to language, and my belief is, and my experience has been, that small shifts in language that you use as a salesperson can make incredible differences in the level of your success. It's from the psychology that I study and the numerous books and firsthand experience on the sales side as well as on the consumer side. If you pay attention to the language that people use, you can often sort of figure out the level of success that this particular salesperson has. And if you adjust your language on your side, you can notice a difference in the reaction to your prospect. So it's the the age old. You walk into the resale store and they say, "Can I help you?" And your natural inclination is no, just looking. However, if you ask the question, "What brings you in today?" then you're going to get an opening to engage that relationship and take it. That small change in language has a dramatic change in the success of a salesperson in that type of environment. So as these gentlemen were talking, the first one that they brought on was the ultra successful gentleman, multiple boats, had retired from a company, clearly had enormous financial resources, where buying a $2, $3, $4, $500,000 boat was I don't want to say a simple decision, but was not a taxing financial decision. We'll look at it that way. So he had the financial resources it wasn't a big deal to make this purchase from a financial standpoint. He had owned and does own multiple boats. So he had gone and he kind of went through the progression of his boat ownership. And in addition to owning from the picture, he didn't get into the specifics, but what looked like to be a 70 to 80 foot yacht was where his 40 footer was his tender, or his 41 was his tender. He talked about when he moved up to that 41 that his wife and his captain that handles all of his boat stuff researched, remember that word, that language, they researched this boat for 2 years. Now think about that. This is a gentleman that clearly knows boats, clearly has a great experience because he had owned multiple of this manufacturer's boat over the years, had a great relationship with the dealership from what he explained, the financial resources, the boating knowledge himself. I mean, you could just tell by the way he talked boats that, yes, he had a captain that handled a lot of his stuff, but you could tell he was also a very competent boater. And him and his wife and his captain spent 2 years researching to make sure that this was the boat that they wanted to get. Now, isn't that interesting that from our side, as a salesperson, I look at that person and I think, well, that's a person that if he's going to buy a boat, he's going to come to me and he's going to know exactly what he wants, and he's just going to one day decide, I need another boat. He's going to come in and he's going to buy it. And there's not much researching going on. He's not going online and he's not looking at things. And you'd be partly right, because he said he didn't do it. He said his wife and his captain did all of the research. They were the ones that were online, and he did mention that it was done online. They were the ones watching video. They were the one researching the specs of the boat, the weight to power ratio, all of those things that an experienced boater would look for. They kind of reported back to him and said, yeah, I think that's the right one. The wife picked out some of the details of the boat. She wasn't there on stage with them, but she sounded like a competent boater herself, and knew what she wanted and knew what she liked, and was on the boat and using the boat consistently with him and their children. So 2 years of research before making the decision to buy a 41 footer that would be the second boat that they would, in this case, fish out of when they were down with their yacht, and use that to run around as a tender on their yacht as well. So he used the term research online, not talking with the salesperson that they clearly had a great relationship with, because he mentioned several times how strong the relationship was with the dealer and how well they supported him, and that played into it. So just a quick side note, of all five of the four of the six that were current boat owners and had bought multiple of that brand, each one of them mentioned the importance of the service department and the service of the dealership. So this is a premium category. I'm not going to reveal who the manufacturer was, because that is really irrelevant, but I didn't get their permission to mention it. But the service department and the service provided by the dealer was key in them staying with that manufacturer and staying buying those boats from that manufacturer and that dealer. So as an owner, if you're listening to this and you have some weak areas in your service department, if you're not getting the amount of repeat and referral business that you believe you should, that is where you need to, that's the adjustment that needs to be made, is figure that side out of it, okay? Now, the next part that I want to go to is the other end of the spectrum. Because the other two gentlemen that had owned multiple boats and had moved up, now none of them were at the financial level of this gentleman, because each of them made a comment, but still very highly successful, and buying the boat included a lot of research. Research online. Several of them mentioned even after buying their first of this manufacturer and moving up, they still researched other brands. And they talked a lot about their love for this particular brand of boat, this manufacturer. They had a true connection, and yet they still researched other manufacturers. Several of them mentioned they were boat show junkies. They liked to go to boat shows. That's where they did some of their own personal research. And I thought that was very interesting as well. It's part of my, in my talk, I had mentioned that once a boater gets on the educational spectrum and they buy their first boat, they almost certainly go back and start their researching process for their next boat very quickly. Now, it may be very light research by attending boat shows and watching videos and looking at listings online, but they all have their next boat in mind as to where they want to go. And it may be, in these guys' cases, a couple of them moved up within a year or two. For others, it may be 3, 4, 5, 10 years. But that's another interesting piece that came out of this conversation. Now I want to go to the gentleman that had just taken delivery 2 weeks prior to the event. Now it was funny because he referenced my educational spectrum directly. As he was speaking, he talked about how he went through each of the phases that I described, and that I described his process to a T. Now, this gentleman it was about 10 months from first starting their research to ultimately deciding to, yes, make their boat buying decision and deciding to build a boat, and then having the boat built and delivered to them. So during that time, while he was on the educational spectrum, here's what he said he did. He said he was very concerned about safety. He was very concerned about quality, and he demoed several boats. So he went out on boats and he actually experienced them firsthand. One of the things he mentioned is one of the manufacturers he was looking at didn't have a build-a-boat program online. They didn't offer that service, and he said, I wasn't able to interact with this manufacturer the way I wanted to. So I cut them out of the list and got it down to, I was evaluating, again, researchers, evaluators, and now buyers. He said when I was evaluating, I cut it down to those two and evaluated those brands and a couple different models within those brands. Just as I talked about my educational spectrum, narrowing their choices, right, by a process of elimination. He did exactly that. Now, his research consisted of online, watching videos, going to manufacturer's website, building boats and saying, okay, if I went with the 23, I could add all of these options. I'd be at this price point, or I could move up to the 25, and maybe I could scale down the options a little bit and still be real close to the 23, so I could get more boat, less options, but similar price. And he was comparing, he was evaluating, that was the actual process that he went through. And it was great because it was very fresh in his mind, because he had just gone through this process and just kind of hit that high point of taking delivery. And again, the language he used was the exact language that I had used in the talking through the educational spectrum of the boat buyer in my keynote, which he happened to be there for. So they heard all of that, and he just referenced back to my talk. But what does this all mean to you? Well, here's what I took from it. The first thing, the note that I wrote down, and I don't know if he used this language, but he said he was scared. He was scared that he was going to make the wrong decision. He did all of this research because of that fear. And I mentioned that in some of my other podcasts and some of my other articles, that consumers that are making their purchase decision have that fear of making the wrong decision. That's why the gentleman that This was adding to his fleet of boats, very deep financial resources. He spent 2 years to research, and this gentleman spent 10 months to research his first boat because they have that fear. They were scared, which was his language, scared of making the decision and buying a boat. Here's my $200,000. Give me the boat that you made all of these promises about, and I'm scared that all the promises you made aren't going to be held true. And I can't get my money back. You're not gonna take the boat back after 3 weeks if it turns out that it was a disaster. If it was if it didn't lead up to or hold up to the expectations that you set. And I think it's very, very important that as a salesperson and as a dealership owner, you understand that level of fear. And that level of fear happens with first-time buyers, but it happens with our high-end repeat buyers, educated and experienced boaters. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend 2 years researching their next boat. They would just pull the trigger based on a gut feel. Now, some people certainly do that, but a majority, because this panel had a vast range of experience and wealth, a vast majority of them have that fear that they're going to make the wrong decision. They're going to buy the wrong type of boat. They're going to buy the wrong size of boat. They're going to put the wrong horsepower on the boat. It's going to be underpowered or overpowered. Fear that they're going to pay too much for the boat. Although nobody really got into it up on stage because the questions didn't lead to that getting a good deal. It did lead to getting a good value, which was making sure that this was the boat that was going to be optimal for the way they were going to use it. So understanding that your prospects have that fear, that may be why they're not responding to your emails. That may be why they don't open up to you and just tell you exactly what they're looking for, tell you that they have a trade, tell you what exactly is going on so that you can truly help them. Now, that's not their problem. That's your problem as a salesperson, because as a salesperson, as a dealership owner, your responsibility is to use language and communicate with them in a way that breaks down those barriers, allows them to open up, ask good questions, not just questions, but good questions that help them reveal what they really need and want, so you can then explain to them and get them over that fear. Help them make sure they do make the right decision, make sure they do power their boat properly, make sure they do get the options that they need and not get the options they don't need. Make sure that they get a fair value for their boat and trade. And not that I don't want you to make a good margin, but you just have to explain to them and have to convince them and compel them that this is the right decision and it is a good value. That the price that they're paying is less than the value that they're getting. And that doesn't mean a 10% deal or a 15% deal or an 18% deal. That could easily mean a 20 or 22 or even a 25% deal if the value is there that you as a dealer provide, you as a salesperson provide, and the manufacturer stands behind the product. That certainly means that it can be a high margin deal, but their value is there, that they're getting a good value. So keep all of those things in mind as you're working with the prospect, and especially remember that fear. That was kind of the one that I highlighted and underlined and circled because I thought it was very interesting that he even used those words because a lot of times people won't admit that's one of the things holding them back. But this gentleman was very open, very honest about his experience, and he literally used the word scared. In his decision. I was scared I was going to make a mistake, was scared I was going to buy the wrong boat. So I hope that was valuable. I found it to be incredibly interesting and incredibly educational, and it really just solidified my educational spectrum of the boat buyer. It solidified the approach of the splash system, which includes education. It includes social proof and using testimonials and helping those prospects kind of convince themselves and get very comfortable and reduce that level of fear. It also just kind of solidifies the risk reversal that we do and the messaging and all of the foundational work that goes into the splash system and the communication strategies that we use that are unique to the boating industry and have been highly effective for dealers all across North America and hopefully soon to be in Australia, based on some conversations I've had recently as well. and going more international, which is exciting for us here. But that was something that I really, as I was sitting there taking notes from this panel, I was like, man, this is going to make a very good podcast for people that aren't fortunate enough to be here. And also, just on a side note, if your manufacturers offer dealer meetings and they offer interesting sessions like this, they bring in speakers like myself, and there's some other great ones in the industry. If they do that and it's feasible for you to get there, and that manufacturer is a big piece of your puzzle, I highly encourage you to go. There's a lot of benefits, not just to hear somebody speak and open your mind, but also just the opportunity to get to the facility, to go through the product and see it in the production process and see it at different stages, talk to the engineers, talk to the people that are building the boats and doing that factory tour. That is a very powerful, impactful piece for owners and salespeople, because when you get back to the showroom floor and you're talking to a prospect, you have those stories to pull upon. You hopefully, if you follow the advice I gave all the sales guys that were there in the breakout sessions I did, you will take your phone out and you will actually do videos and do photos of the key areas that differentiate you and your manufacturer, and take that back with you to have to use at your next boat show for the next 12 months or longer, because of that time that you invested at the dealer meeting. So share that with you. If you are interested in learning more about the splash system, diving deeper into the educational spectrum, and building out a 24/7 boat selling machine for you and your dealership, I encourage you to take advantage of a strategy session where we get on the phone and we talk about your business, your opportunities. I just did one this morning with a dealership principal and had a great conversation, and she was very interested in getting started with one of our programs, and that's going to be a huge step for her and her business, and change the direction that they've been going, and start plugging some of the holes that she felt they had in their dealership with a lot of the stuff that we talked about here on the educational spectrum of a boat buyer. So you can go to boatdealerprofits.com/success, and you can schedule a call there. It'll be a very valuable call, regardless of if we decide that you're a good client for us, and if you decide, hey, this is something that's going to be impactful for our dealership. I can promise you that that time spent on the phone will be valuable for you and your dealership going forward, because I'm going to ask you some difficult questions. I'm going to ask you some questions that maybe you haven't thought about before, and are going to open your eyes to some opportunities, or open your eyes to ways at looking at some opportunities or some problems in your business that will be valuable no matter what the end result of the conversation is. So that's boatdealerprofits.com/success, and you can do that there. Obviously, you can check out previous podcast episodes, and my boating industry article just came out in the mail yesterday. That one was What I Learned Mystery Shopping Over 100 Dealerships This Summer. That is a fantastic article. I think actually it's probably one of my better ones that I've done. As I was just reading through it, sometimes I write them and they go in a couple months later, and that was a great article that you definitely want to check out. If you don't have a copy of my book, you can get a free copy. If you want a hard copy of the book, go to boatdealerprofitsbook.com. You can get a free copy. Just ask that you cover shipping and handling. If you say, hey, you know what, I just want a copy of the book, I just want access to the information, I'll read it online, you can get a free downloadable version, and I believe that website is boatdealerprofits.com/book. And you can get it there. You'll get instant access to a downloadable version, and be happy to get that in your hands. So thank you very much for listening. I look forward to talking to you very soon on a strategy session. Those are a lot of fun, and a lot of value is provided during those conversations. And we will see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.